Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
I get to meet people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Now, because we're in Hawaii and it's the middle of the Pacific, we get a lot of people from Asia.
Mm-hmm.
But, anybody wants to come to Hawaii and spend a month or 3 months, a year, whatever you can afford, right? Because it is very expensive to live here. But so I've gotten to make friends and meet people from all over the world, and that's been wonderful.
Yeah.
And I love Hawaii. I love Hawaii.
I love that.
So
Go ahead.
So the story's not over yet. You haven't gotten to the writing part yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah. So I'm kind of done with my job. There's things going on at the university that I don't particularly care for. And so I decide to sell my condominium and come to school in California. So I went to, what's it called? Pacifica Graduate Institute up in Carpinteria.
Yeah.
And I lived in Carpinteria and I went to school there. I wanted to study mythology. I was going to really take my writing very seriously. And I went to school there, and I'm a Jungian, so I understood what was going on and liked the classes and all, but I couldn't really figure out how that was going to. What I really learned at that school was how to do research. So I quit school. I didn't finish my PhD degree. I quit school, and the next day, it's always just the next day, the next thing, life opens up, right? I went to a little writer's workshop thing that was held at Schott Center, which was part of Santa Barbara City College. And I met my writing teacher, Ann Lowenkoff, and she recognized right away who I was. I didn't know. I still don't know someday. And she said, I will read anything you write. Right. So I started writing.
Wow.
And I could write short stories. I hadn't written a book yet, but I started writing a book about Oakdale. And things just took off from there.
Wow.
Just about the time I'm ready to leave the area, I was living in Ojai. I was teaching at Santa Barbara City College. I was teaching for Ventura Community College down the road a piece, out in Santa Paula. So I'm driving about 200 miles a day, doing all this crazy teaching, and somehow I found time to write. I mean, I look back on it now and I think, I don't know how I ever did this, but I did. And I got my first short story published, which is the first part of the chapter of the book of Church of Unrealized Fantasies.
Really? Wow.
Yes. So all this, I mean, it all pieces together when you look at it from the long angle, but it's been kind of a crazy ride.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
So how long were you in Ojai and teaching at Santa Barbara? By the way, that's one of the prettiest campuses I've ever seen in my life. Oh my goodness.
And there's a lot of skunks at night.
It's so pretty there though. I mean, it's just
It's beautiful. And it's a good school too. It was a really good school. I really liked working there. I wouldn't have left. And I loved where I lived in Ojai. I wouldn't have left except our department chairman came in one day and said it was 2009 when things were really starting to fall apart in California real estate, and
Yeah.
people were losing their houses, and it was awful.
Yeah.
She walked in and she said, "Things are not going well. The enrollment is going to drop." Because everybody was, coming up from the
Mm.
South to get jobs and send money back home, and
Yeah.
love those students. Absolutely love those students. And she said, "If anybody can get out now, get out."
Mm.
I looked around the room. There were 45 of us up there
Mm.
teaching. Some people only teaching one class, but I mean, there was a room full of teachers.
Mhm.
And I looked around, and people had kids and property and lives. And I'm single. I can go anywhere. My degree is very well regarded, and I had by that time 15 years, 20 years of experience.
Mhm.
And so I just sent out letters to anybody in Hawaii.
Mm.
Anybody need anybody need me?
Mhm.
And I ended up in Hilo,
Was that
which was
because you missed Hawaii? Were you trying to get
I
back?
love Hawaii. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I had started a book when I was at Pacifica.
Mhm.
The guy said, "Okay, what do you want to do your thesis on? You got to start thinking about this." And I said, "Well, I'm really interested in petroglyphs." And he said, "No." I'm thinking, where does writing start?
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you have any other ideas?" And I said, "Well, I'm real interested in Hawaii." And he said, "Hawaii is not a culture." I
What?
came up out of my, yeah, I
Oh
came
my
up out of my
goodness. It's
chair
one of the
so
richest
quick.
cultures on the planet.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Oh my
said, "There is
goodness.
language, there is dance, there's food,
Oh,
there's people, there's
yeah.
what?" I said, "What are you thinking of, Waikiki?"
There's the
I
aloha
mean,
spirit. I mean, come on.
thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
There's vast religion. So that was really the reason I quit that school.
Oh,
I thought, this guy doesn't know,
yeah.
and I'm not interested in playing this game.
I don't blame you.
So that's when I quit. But then I found Anne. So one of the things I was really interested in, and which would have been my PhD thesis had
Mhm.
I stayed and been able to convince them, I was reading Hawaiian history. I mean, I just got pissed.
Mhm.
So I came back to Hawaii every once a year because I really did miss it. I really missed the spirit.
Mhm.
So I started buying these books and bringing them back to Ojai, and I taught myself the history. And one of the people that really caught my attention was a lady, a spiritual leader, uh, and a li'i from Maui, and her name was Kalola.
Mhm.
And she was a Pi'ilani of the Pi'ilani family that was head of Maui back in the day.
Mhm.
And I followed her history as best as I could do. And I got to meet one of her family members.
Mm.
Now, nobody alive is alive now that knew her, but he was aware of her and the family. Some of her the history got so distorted and so lost that some of the family didn't even know about her.
Yeah.
But he did, and he took me to Maui. We went up to a heiau, which is an old temple,
Mhm.
and he opened the gate for me and
Wow.
said to the ooh, I'm getting chicken skin just thinking about it, and said, "This lady wants to learn. This lady wants to know."
Mhm.
So I wrote my first book, Malolo o Kalola, about Kalola's history. And she was the queen, chiefess, um, that when Kamehameha came and started killing everybody.
Yeah.
And because she was old and died, they got her daughters, and they were called the captive queens, and
Mm.
he was able to conquer the rest of the islands.
Wow.
So that was the start. That was the first book I wrote. It took me
Mhm.
10 years to do research. But when I got to Hilo, I believe that the spirit moves me.
Mhm.
This The spirit said, "Okay, I had made a promise to myself that I was going to stand in every place I needed to write about. one of the last places I needed to write about was the Big Island.
Mm-hmm.
It's big. You got to be there for a while, So
Yeah.
every weekend, so I was working at the university, and every weekend I would take off and drive around and go to another spot that I needed to stand in and to sit down on a rock and say, okay, now the sun comes up over here and the
Mm-hmm.
sun sets over here, and there's this and there's that. So that I got to really feel for the place. And then a couple years later, then I got back over to Honolulu. And a couple of years later, a friend came out from Vermont, and the last place I needed to visit was we took one of the last ferries to Molokai.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last place I needed to be. And then I knew that the book was ready. And it was.
So why was it the last ferry to Molokai, or one of the last?
Nobody goes to Molokai. There's
Okay.
only about 6,000 people that live on that whole island. And there's nothing there.
So
Nothing that there's no tourist attraction. They don't really want tourists over there. They're
they're
very
not
happy to
necessarily
live their
welcomed.
lives over there. Well, it wasn't they were unwelcome, but there's no big hotels.
Yeah,
There's none of that tourist stuff. So they just are living their lives over there.
I got you.
So so then I came back and I finished that book
Mm-hmm.
and I put it in the drawer. I got it published. And Sweetie Bird, the character that I'm working with now, because of that short story, she rose up and said, "I'm not done.
Mm-hmm.
I got something I want to say."
Mm-hmm.
And so I started in. So here we are 2 books later, and just earlier I was working on the 3rd book, working on editing the 3rd book.
Wow. So the first two, were they historical, like factual type, nonfiction type books?
Um, Kalola is historical fiction. She was a
Okay.
real person. The best that I could, um, I followed the history of her life and what was going on at the time and who she was married to and her children and all of that stuff. I don't speak Hawaiian, so I did the best I could at the time.
Yeah.
But the Church of Unrealized Fantasies and In a Pickle is totally, totally different. Totally different.
Yeah.
It's literary fiction that you probably never read before.
So
It's it's crazy stuff.
so your inspiration for writing, and I know it was spiritual, right? But your inspiration for writing the first two books really came from kind of that aloha spirit, that spirit of the islands that moved you, right?
Yeah, except don't say the first two because the first book was about Kalola. Then
Right.
I totally changed gears, and this
Oh,
next
gotcha.
2 books are about Sweetie Bird.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Okay, so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first one was inspired. I got you. And then talk about the next two with Sweetie Bird.
Okay, so Sweetie Bird, um, so you're from California, you know
Hmm.
what's up the road, right?
Hmm.
Used to be Camarillo State Mental Hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's Channel Island, California State University at Channel Islands.
Hmm.
That's another beautiful
Oh yeah,
campus.
it really is.
Beautiful campus. I applied to work there. I would have gladly worked there. I thought it was a beautiful campus. So I'm still going to my program, going to meetings, and we used to go down to the school. There was a psychology teacher down there who would have us come down and talk to people about alcoholism and addiction.
Hmm.
That's how I got introduced to that school.
Right.
So sometimes universities feel quite like a mental institution. So
Yeah. Well, truer
there you
words were never
go.
spoken. I'm
There
telling
you
you.
go.
Yeah. No, I totally
I'm
agree with
I've
that. I totally
I've
agree with
had
that.
the privilege to work in several, and it can get kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So Sweetie Bird, I mean, she's homeless when she
Yeah.
starts out. This book, Church of Unrealized Fantasies, was first. This is the bell tower for
Right.
the school.
Gotcha.
And to get a vacation, she could check herself into the mental institution because she told him she heard voices.
Yeah.
Well, as my friend Bob says, we all have voices in our head. I mean, maybe people do, maybe they don't. I do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm as crazy as anybody else, but
Right.
so there's two voices that vie for Sweetie Bird's attention. So we're really talking about three main characters here. They're all just wrapped into one body.
Right.
So she has Mama. Now, if your mama raised you right, she gave you some good advice and she told you how to be in the world, right? So she's got Mama's voice and she's also got Agnes. And Agnes is the voice that you don't say what you're really thinking, you hold it in because you're gonna really screw up if you say it.
Yeah.
Agnes doesn't care.
Yeah.
So she'll
Unfiltered.
say it.
Yeah.
Unfiltered. My friend Tim says unshackled and unattended. I mean, but she's at least inside her head, she says what she wants and she calls it the way it is.
Yeah.
She just calls it. And so there's these three, and then Sweetie Bird, some literary person, some reviewer said she's ignorant but intelligent. You know, she's got common sense. She's got street sense. And if she doesn't, I'll tell you, Agnes sees it. So there's these three people walking around in this body that is, when that book starts out, homeless. And my elevator pitch is, what happens when a homeless woman wins the lottery, the most Powerball lottery that ever happened in California state history? What do you do with all that money?
Interesting.
And so the story is what she does with it.
Wow.
And I don't want to give a spoiler here.
No, we won't. We won't spoil it.
But it's a rousing story. Now she lives in that area, right? And who lives in Montecito? Destiny lives in Montecito.
Really?
So
Interesting.
there she is.
Yeah.
There she is. So I wrote that book and people thought it was pretty funny. I mean, it is funny. I'm trying to get at things that need to be addressed in society.
Yeah.
In a humorous way. I mean, humor cuts.
Yeah.
If you're listening, sometimes it's just funny, but it can cut clear to the core. Think of George Carlin. He never was funny. He was just telling the truth. Dick Gregory. I used to march in the streets with Dick Gregory. He was telling the truth. Anyway.
The unvarnished truth.
So somebody said to me, well, how did she get homeless? And that's in a pickle.
There you go.
How did she get homeless? So I really wrote book 2 first, and then I wrote book 1, and now I'm working on book 3. I mean, this is Sweetie Bird's life. It just kind of goes along.
So the
Follow
third
it
book,
if you can.
So the third book, do you want to scoop it for us? Do you want to tell us what it's about? Do you want to? I mean, obviously, you're more than welcome to come back on and talk about the third book when it's ready, because you're editing it, right? So it's not ready to be released yet.
No.
Any idea when it'll be released?
I can safely say sometime next year. It has to go through my editor and all that stuff. My birthday's in May. It might be my birthday present. We'll see.
There you go. Well, we don't want to rush you. So whenever you're ready, we'd love to have you back on to talk about it. Do you want to preview it for us, or do you want to wait until then?
Well, let's just say that it's called, I think the working title for now is called The Ivory Tower.
Okay. Okay. And this is
She's
a
involved.
continuation of the Sweetie Bird series. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Should be interesting.
It's been fun to write. It's really fun. Sometimes I read the lines that I wrote, 6 months ago and go, oh my God, that's kind of funny.
So
I chuckle sometimes.
if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking about writing a book, what's your number one best piece of advice for them?
Pick up a pen and a piece of paper.
So just start, just go.
Just start. I have a friend now who's starting in his head and it doesn't ever get to paper.
Yeah.
He's got all these great ideas and they're just confused as they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And just pick up a pen, put it on paper, pick up a
You can always
pencil.
reorganize
Doesn't
it
matter.
later, right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to. You have to. You have to. But unless it's on a piece of paper, and I don't believe, I write on paper.
Mm-hmm.
I write from my head down my arm, out my hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't write on the computer. I transcribe it to the computer and play with it there, but I start out with pencil on paper.
Yeah.
It's the old way to do it, but that's okay. I'm old school.
Well, everybody has a process, right? And the
Mhm,
process that works
mhm,
for them, you know what I mean? So
mhm,
I've interviewed authors that write books in an audio fashion where they,
mhm,
they record tapes
mhm,
and then somebody
mhm,
transcribes it for them. I mean, it's so
mhm,
everybody
mhm.
has their own system. Everybody has their own
Everybody has
process.
their own deal.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
But that's what works for me.
So what's the number one thing you love the most about being an author?
Being able to tell a story. Have
Yeah.
you figured out I'm a storyteller?
Yeah.
I
Kind of.
when I teach, I don't teach, teach. I tell stories.
Yeah.
And the students remember, they don't remember the grammar lessons,
Mhm.
I before E, doesn't matter. I always tell them that we're ready to break the rule as soon as we break it,
Right.
but they remember the stories. They remember the stories. "Did she tell you the story about?" "No,
Mhm.
no, she hasn't told us that one yet."
Yeah. Here's a question for you.
Mhm,
Because you teach English as a second language, I've been told, and I'm not fluent in another language other than English, but I've been told that English comparatively, compared to German, compared to Latin, compared to Spanish, that kind of thing, is actually a pretty difficult language. Is that true?
there yes, absolutely. Well, because all those languages are, Romance languages
Yeah.
as English. But, there's about, depending on what person you're listening to, there's about 6 to 7,000 languages in the world. Now, many of them are dying out rapidly, but English, Japanese, and Mandarin Chinese are the three hardest languages to learn.
Well,
Why? I think English is so hard to learn because we borrowed so much from other languages and we don't spell the way it sounds and we don't say what we really mean and there's so much slang and we have the most vocabulary of any language.
oh, I didn't know
There's
that
over
either.
1,000,000 words. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, coming into a language where things don't look like a language that you're
Mm.
used to, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn.
Yeah,
So my job.
I interviewed a gentleman the other day that immigrated here from Russia,
Mhm,
20 some years ago. And when he came over, he was a licensed attorney working with the Russian, the Supreme Court in Russia, the highest court in the land. And when he came here, he didn't know a lick of English. And
mhm,
he ended up getting into law school and he ended up attending a law school to finish his law degree here and didn't
mhm.
know English. And so he learned English going through law school. And the other students at the law school were like, how in the world are you doing this? So
I can't imagine how he could get into law school not knowing the
crazy,
language.
just
One of
crazy.
my first students back in Massachusetts when I was doing my graduate school, he knew no English. He was a professor at the University of Tenerife in the Canary Islands,
Hmm.
and subject was international tax law,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't say hello in English.
Wow.
And it was a trying year for him. And he
Yeah.
said he used to open up the New York Times and try to read the newspaper. He couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But in the afternoon, he babysat his daughter, who was 5, and she used to listen to Sesame Street. And he realized that he was learning, English from Sesame Street and coming to school in the morning. So there you go. You start where you start. If you
Yeah,
don't
I've
know
heard
the
that
language, you
before.
don't know the language.
I've
Yeah.
heard that before. I've heard that immigrants learned a lot of English from Sesame Street. I've heard that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
cool. Yeah, you
It's
do it
true.
wherever you can,
And
right? Might be a story,
well,
right?
if you go to the library and you don't speak the language, you better start in the kids section.
Yeah.
She can't understand an adult book at all.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You start with the kids stuff. You start learning how to say hello, my name is, where's the bathroom?
Gotcha. So you live in Honolulu.
I
You
live in
live
beautiful Manoa Valley. I'm looking out the window right now at the Ko'ola Mountains.
beautiful.
It's
How
another
long have you
beautiful
lived
day in
there?
paradise. In Hawaii total, I just passed 30 years. Now, some of those years were in California. I was in California for 6.5 years, but
Wow.
I was back here all the time because
Yeah.
I was doing research on that book. So I don't really count I was kind of like bi-coastal, if you
I
will.
gotcha. So do you get island fever?
I had it when I first moved here. I was afraid I was going to get knocked off the rock. And I just and I would go to work and I'd think, okay, we got through another day. And then I went to the mainland because I realized I was going to stay here. And I had gotten my job at the university and things were going to settle down, right?
Yeah.
And I went to go get the rest of the stuff that I had in storage. And when I came back, then it's home. It's
Yeah.
home. I haven't left the island. I didn't go anywhere last summer. I can only travel in the summer because I only have summer clothes. I don't have winter clothes anymore.
Got rid of all the coats from Vermont, did you?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Gave them away. I had a classmate that was going to Russia, and I said, "Here, take all my sweaters, take all my boots. I don't need them anymore. I'm going to Hawaii."
Yeah. I bet that felt good.
So, yeah. So Hawaii's home.
Yeah.
It's home.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been a lot of fun and a really fast hour. I really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, it has been an hour. Okay.
And we'd
Me
love
too, Mike.
we'd love to have you back to talk about your next Sweetie Bird.
Okay. I'll get in touch with you when Sweetie Bird lands again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
All right. All right. Aloha.
Aloha. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.